So before we get into the different motor abilities, there's one more thing to discuss, and this is the force time curve of muscle contraction. So same thing, we kind of covered this briefly on our video on impulse. So whenever we initiate a muscle contraction, the muscle starts from 0 or negligible levels of muscle force being produced, and then it spikes up to some level. The harder we try to contract the muscle, the faster we try to lift something. The heavier the object we try to lift, the higher that muscle action is going to be. And then as fatigue sets in, it's gonna drop off. This kind of like previews, some of how the different motor abilities kind of work. So when we look at just mechanical tension placed on a limb or on a joint, at a relaxed level, it basically starts at 0, and then as we try to contract the muscle, it's gonna spike up. So a lot of the times the goal with a lot of training is, we want to achieve a higher peak, and this is typically what we're going to see when we do strength training. We're trying to achieve a higher magnitude of force production produced. We want that peak to be as high as possible. And the second thing we want to do is we want to achieve that peak in the shortest time possible. So what that means is, say the peak is up here, like muscle action starts here, it's at 0 at this point, and it spikes up to here. What we want to decrease, we want to move that peak over here so it's closer to that initial time. We want that peak to basically go straight up as much as possible, as opposed to having this long delayed muscle action that takes a lot of time to reach a maximal muscle contraction. Now this kind of like previews kind of what we're going to get into with the different motor abilities. Is when we start from a relaxed state, the mechanical tension placed on the limb is near 0, but if we start from an isometrically contracted state, the mechanical tension placed on the limb is already starting at some preliminary level. So we can achieve a higher time to peak contraction. It doesn't take as long because you're eliminating the period of time that we have to go from 0 up to wherever that isometric action would be. We're already starting here, so then we have less distance to go to get to the top. And same thing if we start from an eccentric muscle action. If with eccentric muscle action, remember, we can generate more force eccentrically than we can concentrically or even isometrically. So if we precede the muscle action with an eccentric action, and we can load that tissue somehow, and then we start off with a mechanic. Even though the muscle activation level may not be quite as high, the mechanical tension placed on the limb is extremely high. It can be higher than whatever it would have been than we could possibly achieve concentrically, and then basically as we switch from an eccentric muscle action to a concentric one, it's basically dropping off into that concentric muscle action. So we're already starting at a level that's higher than the highest peak that we would achieve anyways. So that's kind of what's interesting when we precede a lot of concentric muscle action with eccentric ones. We're going to return to the force time curve in the next playlist when we get into volume and intensity. But for now, just remember, so that's kind of like the preview of the different motor abilities we're going to cover. The next video, we're just going to do a very quick overview of all the motor abilities, then we're going to start going through each one individually.